That took me 20 years to figure out. I just gave it to you in minutes.
What role do you think the evil one played? And then what do you think happened in the afterlife when we pass away?
Oh, listen, you know what? There's a doctrine in the Bible that I detest, but it's there. Okay? It does say there's a heaven, there's a hell. And Jesus says it wasn't made for you and me. It says that it was made for the devil and his angels. All right? And the picture you have of creation in the scripture is like an election in reverse. Now, you're American, I'm Canadian. In our two countries, if we don't like the current leader, we can vote the boy out, right? And or the girl out for that matter, because we've had female leaders in Canada. I don't know. You know what? If Nikki Haley had won, you would have had one. Anyway, regardless, she didn't. Trump's in there. But regardless, if you like the person that you want to vote for, you say yes to that person, and they get elected, and it has to do with the will of the people being reflected in our choice. In the scripture, you have king number 1 and king number 2. One is characterized by goodness and life. The other is characterized by the lie and evil. And then the scripture says we have to choose which king we serve. And so we choose King Jesus or we choose King Satan. And then you enter into what has part of their domain. Actually, there's always been an argument in the Christian church in every branch. We're talking about 2 billion people across the face of planet Earth right now. All different kinds of denominations and streams. The largest one is the Roman Catholic Church. The second largest one is the Eastern Orthodox Church. After that, you have a huge Anglican communion. And after that, you have the Wesleyan Methodists. But regardless of how many streams you have, right? You have all these streams. And they've always argued, are we predestined or do we choose? Did God set it up so that we have no choice? Or do we set it up so that God has no choice? And if you push either of those two things into the corner, if you push the predestinarian thing into the corner, God becomes a demon because he takes away every kind of choice that you ever had. And if you push the free will thing into the corner, God becomes a wimp and the human becomes the God because he makes all of the decisions. And so neither one of those things is palatable. I think, by the way, both of those are pretty ugly, right? What I see in the scripture is 2 circles. King Jesus here, King Satan here. King Satan has a kingdom characterized by evil and darkness and sin and horror and rape and violence and evil and manipulation and human trafficking and all the things you want to think of that are drug addiction and so on. King Jesus has sacrifice and kindness and goodness and education and the well-being of society and the advancement of all that is good and righteous. And the believer chooses. When the believer chooses King Sin, they enter into the predestination that is attached to that king. When the believer chooses King Jesus, the believer enters into the predestination attached to King Jesus. And so free will and predestination both exist beautifully. The believer exercises, the person, I should say, because sometimes they're believers, sometimes they're not. The person chooses yes to this king or yes to this king. That's the exercise of free will. These two have a domain, and we enter in what they have predestined for us when we make that choice. And so predestination and free will come together in that. That, by the way, that took me 20 years to figure out. I just gave it to you in minutes. You should record this and send it out to your constituency. Anybody who's Baptist or Presbyterian or Methodist who's listening to you.
No, I'll make a clip of it.
You should.
I'll put it on YouTube. What do you want to call it?
The predestination and free will are one.
Predestination.
Are one. Yes, they are. There's 2 predestinations and there's 1 free will.
Do you think we can like
there's predestination in the life of the devil, and the believer makes the decision. We have been given free will to choose that predestination or this one.
Do you think somebody who's chosen one path can you cross the other path?
Yes. In fact, I can say this to you without a second's hesitation. Jesus' kingdom is characterized by that which is right and pure and holy. The unclean spirit's domain is characterized by everything that's evil. Every now and then, somebody over here likes their sin. You know why people sin? They like it. They do it for lots of good reasons, for all kinds of weird and wonderful reasons. When they do, the domains overlap. And somebody can wind up under the influence of the wrong power. And oh, by the way, every now and then, somebody who's wicked realizes that this is terribly wrong. They have chosen something that's horrible, something that's ugly, something that's just absolutely dehumanizing. And they come to a crossroads and they make a decision to try and exit this life to come into this one. And they do that all the time too. Sometimes the two domains overlap. And this gives opportunity for either the Lord or the unclean spirit to take advantage.